Every human has ideas and communicates ideas. Every human makes decisions in their job and in life. And this is going to be right there alongside us, thinking and helping us make decisions and communicating ideas and challenging our thoughts. And so I think it's going to be a tool that has a broader reach and broader impact than almost any technology we've ever seen.
Welcome to the Coursera podcast, where we have conversations with renowned experts and industry leaders to explore global trends impacting the future of education and work. I'm your host, Arunav Sinha, Vice President of Global Communications at Coursera. Generative AI has captured people's imagination like no other technology in our recent memory. As the fastest growing technology in human history, it has the potential to transform every aspect of our lives and impact millions of jobs. According to BCG, 89% of CEOs rank AI as their top three tech priorities for 2024. But 59% of those leaders also say they have limited or no confidence in their executive team's proficiency in the technology. The choices we make about GenAI will not only determine an organization's competitive edge, but also influence broader societal outcomes. Today, I'm excited and honored to welcome a leader who has fully embraced GenAI at his company and has now made a debut as an educator, teaching others how to get the most value out of this technology. Coursera CEO and my super boss, Jeff Maggioncalda, is our guest today. Welcome, Jeff. I'm so delighted.
It's great to be here, Arnav. I'll tell you what, I've got generative AI on my mind. I just came back from Davos. It was the only thing people were talking about was generative AI. So it's great to be here.
Congratulations on launching your first course, Navigating Generative AI, a CEO Playbook. How are you feeling? What was the experience like?
Well, I have three daughters who are 26, 29, and 32. And when they heard I was going to be trying to create a course, they're like, "Dad, what are you doing? That's like not good for your health." It was a lot. It was a lot of work. I have so much appreciation for other educators on Coursera because I built the whole course myself, and I even did a lot of editing on Final Cut Pro. I mean, I kind of went deep and wanted to learn everything about it. But it's exciting. I feel relieved that I put it out there. And every 90 days, I'm going to be updating this course because things are changing so quickly. So when I designed the course, not only did I put together an outline based on what I'm hearing other people are looking for in terms of a curriculum for execs, I also designed it so that I have certain courses, readings, and modules that I can update very rapidly. So every 90 days, I'm planning to update this based on the latest and greatest experts and research and capabilities of the technology.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we will have a chance to talk about your course. But I want to go back to what you mentioned. You just came back from Davos, Switzerland, where you attended the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum. Unsurprisingly, AI at work and education and transparency about its use, adoption, ethics, all of these were hot button issues. What were some of the biggest takeaways for you?
Well, when I headed out there last year, I was just at the debut of ChatGPT, and it was interesting because a lot of the people that I saw in Davos this year told me, "You're the guy who showed me ChatGPT for the first time," and I was like, "Yep, I did." And then they said, "So a year's passed. What's new?" A lot of people are looking for like, okay, is this just hype or is something really going to happen? I was sort of expecting that people would say, huh, I don't see a lot of applications out there and companies talking about how it's transformed everything. So maybe this is just hype. But somewhat surprisingly to me, people were not saying this is just hype. People were saying this is hard. But if anything, the expectations for the size and the breadth of the impact are even bigger than they were a year ago. But I think an appreciation of how hard it is to really put together strategy and implement it and manage the risks. I think people are realizing this is going to be more important than ever and more difficult than I thought.
And you were one of the early adopters of the technology, right, when it burst onto the scene during Davos last year. Has your own perspective on GenAI evolved since then?
It has. I mean, clearly putting together a course, as they say, you don't really learn something unless you're able to teach somebody. And so, in putting together a course, I mean, a lot of what that's about is thinking about what's important for people to know. And then on that topic, once you put the outline together, it's sort of like, well, what's the most important things to say about that part? My appreciation mostly has been, I think I had a pretty good gauge on the fact that this is gonna be a really big revolutionary technology. Like, almost as soon as I used it in December of 2022, I'm like, "This is gonna change everything." Very few people are saying it's not gonna change everything. So, like, I think everyone's like, "Yep, okay, that sounds right." As the capabilities of the models got better, I mean, GPT-4 was a big improvement, and to me, that did 2 things. Number 1 is it allowed this tool to perform tasks for me as a CEO. I call it a thought partner, much more proficiently than it could when it was 3.5. So I was like, wow, this is a much more useful tool right now. The capabilities in terms of context window, so the amount of information I can give it. So it's not just the underlying model, but it's the amount of context I can give it is much bigger. So that makes it far more capable. But the thing that really has struck me though is if this rate of improvement of capability keeps up, this thing's going to be more capable than almost anybody I know, and maybe more capable than I am at a large number of cognitive tasks. I don't know exactly when GPT-5 is coming out. I was just in Davos talking to Google about Gemini Ultra, which is sort of the Google, the multimodal GPT-4 competitor. But now OpenAI is working on GPT-5, and everyone now is buying like every GPU that they could possibly buy. Mark Zuckerberg just said that Meta's about, their whole mission now is AGI, artificial general intelligence. Everyone's going after sort of AGI now, and they're stockpiling these GPUs. And so the rate of improvement of these capabilities is going to go up very rapidly. So for me, I think I had a pretty clear view of it as it's turning out. But what's really striking is the rate of capability improvement is not happening linearly. It's happening in leaps and bounds. And we might wake up in 120 days and have a large language model that can do things that we never expected it could do. That discontinuous capability improvement is what has got me nervous, excited, but thinking that this could be happening even faster than people think.
Yeah, so one of the striking things, and you've been a CEO for a long time and you've seen a lot of disruptions in the past as well. But what is different about GenAI versus some of the previous disruptions? And you've talked a little bit about it in different forums, but it'll be great for our audience to get a grasp on that as well.
Yeah, I think to me, it will be on the order of, humans inventing language or humans inventing writing or the printing press or the internet. But I think it might be more profound than something like the internet because I think it'll change the way that we think and it's not just a thinking tool. I think it's going to become a thinker, at least a reasoner. And so the capability of this technology to not just store information or retrieve information, but to actually understand and generate in language thought. The ability to generate, summarize, explain, analyze, evaluate, compare, synthesize, advise, communicate ideas is something that Google doesn't do that. Like a mobile phone doesn't do that. My laptop doesn't do that. Like those are all information tools, but they're not really thinking tools that produce thought. And so I think that the capability of this thing to approximate thinking and then the rate of improvement of that thinking, and given the fact that every human thinks, every human has ideas and communicates ideas, every human makes decisions in their job and in life. And this is going to be right there alongside us, thinking and helping us make decisions and communicating ideas and challenging our thoughts. And so I think it's going to be a tool that has a broader reach and broader impact than almost any technology we've ever seen.
Yeah, so with that profound impact comes what you call the GenAI conundrum. Move too fast and risk pitfalls, and be too cautious, and you lose your competitive edge. Was this your
Yep.
impetus behind launching your first course, a resource for fellow executives and CEOs?
Yeah, I think it's a few things. I decided to make the course because one is Coursera is in the business of educating people on new skills that are important, and it's like, well, generative AI is pretty important, and just for me using these tools as a CEO and help doing my job differently because I'm using these tools in certain ways. I wasn't reading out there about other CEOs who were doing that, so I was like, well, I don't think people know how to use them this way. I should maybe create a course for CEOs so that I can share how I'm using these. But part of my interest as well, given that I think we all need to have sort of a beginner mindset. Nobody has all the answers. Even the people building the technology did not anticipate the capabilities that emerged from the technology. So we don't know where this is going and what's going to happen. And so I think the ability to share and collaborate in communities is really important. So part of the course was me just sharing what I've been doing and sharing ways of CEOs using these tools. But part of it is an intention to build a community that can collaborate together. And as things change, we can all be talking about this stuff, both the positives of what's working and also the negatives and the risks of what maybe is going wrong and what we need to be alert to in terms of risks and negative impacts on society, and what are mitigation strategies for those risks, especially if those risks become manifest. So it really is a combination of both teaching people and also creating a community so that we could all teach each other.
And just not you, you have an incredible lineup of experts who are also teaching alongside you, right?
Yeah, it's that's one of the more exciting parts of the course as well, as I realize that nobody has all the answers on this, certainly not me. But if you look at the course, part of my intention was I wanted to create a course where any CEO or executive, anyone who kind of is responsible for strategy and responsible for a team, that's so that could be a GM, it could be a business unit lead, it could be a CEO, whatever. I thought I'd like to have one course that probably doesn't go too deep because you can't go too deep on everything in just one course, but one course where you can get your arms around almost all the topics that a CEO would need to know. And so there are things like, what is this technology and why is everybody talking about it? What are people saying is going to be the impact? Another one is, how does this technology work? And so I have Andrew Ng coming in and speaking about how the technology works. For CEOs, and I think more broadly, learning how the technology works is valuable. Learning how the technology is used is far more valuable. And so there's a whole part of the course on how it works and how it's used. And I've got, Andrew Ng, who, is one of the world-class experts on building AI systems. And for instance, in this section of the course, I have Hayden Brown, who's the CEO of Upwork. And, that's the largest freelance market in the world. So she is seeing on her platform with freelance copywriters, designers, programmers, project managers, et cetera, because it's so friction free, that marketplace, she's seeing things show up faster than anybody else. And so I put her in a course because I was like, hey, Hayden, give all these CEOs a glimpse of what might be happening with jobs and job roles. So that's kind of in the first part of the course. Then the second part of the course talks a lot about strategy. Okay, so that's how it works and how a CEO can use it to do their job. How do you think about strategy? What's going to be the strategic implications for your business of how to use generative AI? And on this part, among others, I brought in Steve Jarrett, who is the chief AI officer at Orange. And we talk a little bit about, should you train your own models? Should you use RAG, which is called retrieval augmented generation? Should you do fine tuning? It gets a little bit technical, but always at the level that I think a CEO should be able to follow and would be important for them. So in that strategy piece, we've got Steve Jarrett from Orange. Also, Robert Brunner. He is a technology professor at University of Illinois, and he has a course on Coursera called How to Navigate Disruption. So he talks a little bit about what are the implications for, as a CEO, how you need to have strategic recognition and how you need to adapt to disruption. So he has some great thoughts on that. That's the second part of the course, is around setting strategy. The third part is about organizational transformation. So it's like, well, what are you going to need to be thinking about in terms of changing your company with your internal stakeholders? But also, as a CEO needs to know, like, you have external stakeholders. You got a board, you have customers, you have partners. So in this part of the course, I've got Clara Shih, who's the CEO of Salesforce AI, and she talks about organizational readiness. I've got Trina Manudri, who's our CLO, Chief Learning Officer at Coursera. She was the head of digital training at IBM, and she talks a lot about kind of organizational engagement and training of your employees. I have Joe Grunfest, who is at Stanford, and he founded the Directors College. So he's one of the world's experts on how to manage your board. And so he talks about how CEOs need to be engaging with their board of directors. And in other parts of the course, then there's a whole part of the course on understanding managing risks. And I got experts in there. So I kind of teach the whole course, but then I've got these great guest experts who are coming in and giving their deeper and more expert view on certain parts of certain aspects of generative AI.
Yeah, that's an amazing constellation of experts. But that's very tantalizing. And I want you to go a little further on that. is what are some of the few considerations when developing a concrete AI strategy? And I ask this because there is a lot of conversations going on about a fundamental change that Gen AI can have on business model and how CEOs should be thinking about productivity and innovation.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look out there and you look at all the surveys of when CEOs say, "Hey, this is going to be a big deal." You're like, "Well, how? Why? How's it going to be a big deal? What's it really going to be the impact?" And the CEOs they cite a lot of different elements of where they think it's going to have the biggest impact. When Retool did a survey, they asked a bunch of executives, "Why are you doing this?" The number one thing that the execs said was cost savings and productivity. Number two was keeping up with trends. Number three was better meeting customer needs. Number four was keeping up with competitors. So it's kind of a combination of, I think, impact on your business model. I think it's going to be number one, how can you do a better job creating value for your customers? A lot of that's going to be through personalization, responsiveness, better quality answers. And then number two is the productivity piece, which is, separate from creating more value for your customers, how can you reduce your cost and improve the productivity of your employees? And it's kind of a mix depending on your company and how you think about it. A lot of CEOs are like, hey, I'm going to create better services for my customers. I'm going to out innovate my competitors. And then a lot are saying, hey, I just want to improve my productivity. And I think I can automate a lot of stuff. And then, of course, I think most companies are realizing it's a combination. I mean, clearly at Coursera, it's a combination. There's a lot of ways that we're using generative AI at Coursera to create more value for our customers. But there's also ways that we're using generative AI at Coursera to reduce our costs. And I think it's both sides of the equation that most CEOs need to be thinking about when it comes to business model. One other thing I'll just say though is that that's kind of just looking internally, like how can I do a better job for my customers and how can I improve my productivity? But I say, and I haven't heard a lot of other people say this, but when I talk about the risks of generative AI, for CEOs at least, one of the top risks that they've got to be thinking about is business model risk. The risk that somebody, whether that's a competitor who does something different or a new entrant to the market, or whether that's one of your suppliers who can now do things to forward integrate in the value chain and start becoming competitive to you, the chance that some competitor or some competitive dynamic radically changes the environment around you in ways that you didn't expect means that as a CEO, you're going to have to anticipate where those threats might be coming from and be ready or even start responding to mitigate those potential threats. So, yep, there are opportunities for value and productivity. There's also a lot of threats that you need to anticipate and be ready to mitigate.
And Jeff, when you're talking about risk, the course also addresses how to navigate ethical, regulatory, legal dimensions related to Gen AI. And you've been talking to experts and CEOs around the world. What are some of the risks associated with the technology that business leaders should be aware of?
There's a bunch of risks. A lot of people put it under a category called responsible AI. And when you go out there and say, what are the kinds of risks that other leaders and executives are talking about? This is from a survey that was done by McKinsey. The risks that were most cited by CEOs was number one, inaccuracy. So the models might give an inaccurate answer. Two is cybersecurity, because these systems, they're using a lot of data. And part of that could expose PII and other proprietary data to the outside world. Frankly, though, a lot of CEOs are also really worried that bad actors are going to use this technology to be much more effective at penetrating systems and social engineering, which is tricking people. They'll be able to trick people more easily. Number three risk on the survey was intellectual property infringement. Number four is regulatory compliance. Number five, explainability. There's a lot of different risks that other people talk about, but in the course, what I say, my top five that I go after as it relates to a CEO, frankly, I think business model risk is way more important for a CEO to be thinking about than inaccuracy, because there's a lot of ways to understand and bound the issues associated with inaccuracy. Context grounding is one really good one, but there's lots of ways to do that. Business model risk is coming from who knows where, and no one's going to solve that problem other than the CEO. And maybe they have a strategy. But like, if the CEO's not thinking about that risk, your chief data officer's not thinking about that risk, your CHRO's probably not thinking about that risk, your CTO's probably not thinking about that risk. So I feel like there's a pretty big risk that people aren't talking about so much, and it falls squarely on the shoulder of the CEO, which is business model risk. So the five that I put down are business model risk, hallucination and inaccuracy, data security and privacy, intellectual property, and legal and ethical frameworks. And so the course goes through those five to really talk about how might you better understand and then how might you better mitigate those kinds of risks.
That's a very pertinent point because you're right. Not many people talking about business model disruption, definitely not in the same way they're talking about inaccuracy, hallucination, misinformation, bias, some of those aspects. In fact, Jeff, you have provided, and one of the favorite aspects of the course is what you call the playground. And you have actually provided a tool that will help CEOs test out, draft, create their strategy and business model and use it as a thought partner. But can you talk about 2 to 3 ways in which learners can use the playground?
Yeah, so the playground is it's basically a generative AI large language model. It currently is running on Google Gemini Pro, which is a pretty decent model. But what's neat about it is it's built into the course, and when it launches, the learner has direct access to this language model. And it's in a secure environment, totally private. It runs on Google Cloud, so you have all the basic data security and privacy elements associated with Google Cloud. And then because of the way that we've architected on Coursera, nothing that you type in can even be seen, stored, tracked, or anything by any Coursera employee. And then also, according to Google's rules, none of this data can be used to train any model. So it's nice to have a secure playground where you can actually use it to do valuable work without worrying that it's going to create some kind of a vulnerability. Some of the different things that you can do in the playground in the course is, for instance, we talked about competition. When you're learning about how to analyze competitive dynamics, and especially in a world of generative AI, so I give a lecture on that and I show images that says, oh, beware of substitutes and look out for incumbents reinventing this. Watch out for what your suppliers are doing. Think about how customer needs are going to be changing. There's a whole framework that I lay out, but then you can go into the playground and using this technique I describe and teach people how to do, which is context grounding, you can explain your business model to the LLM, to this large language model, say, this is my business. This is what my business looks like. And I explain how to do that. Then I have a prompt that you put in. So once you say, this is what my business looks like, then you put in a prompt that says, now that you know about my business, please analyze all these competitive dynamics. What are my supply chain people going to do? What are my competitors going to do? Who might be the new entrants? How might customer needs change? What might happen with regulatory? And the prompt actually tees up all these potential competitive dynamics. And then it says to the large language model, given this CEO's description of her or his business, I want you to analyze all of these competitive dynamics and tell the CEO what they should be thinking about. And so not only are you using the generative AI, it's actually helping you formulate your understanding of potential competitive dynamics that could hurt you if you're not prepared for them.
I think you just built a corporate strategy tool for CEOs.
You know, it was funny. I was in Delhi a few weeks ago and I was showing this to a state minister of technology. And I showed this particular prompt and he said, this is brilliant. It's going to put McKinsey out of business. Now, having worked at McKinsey, I said, well, not really, because a lot of what McKinsey deals with is sort of organizational transformation and decision making, not just the quality of the answers. But it really is striking the capabilities of these kinds of models. They're not perfect, but they're highly capable.
Did you use GenAI as a thought partner while building out the course?
Oh, no doubt about it. It's exquisitely good at this kind of stuff. And what I was doing is, I would start by saying, I always put in my point of view first. I'll be like, hey, I'm building a course and this is for this kind of an audience and here's the kinds of topics I'm thinking about doing. What do you think of that? And it'll be like, well, I think this is good, but I think you should think about that. And I'll be like, that's a good point. And I'll add some of that in. And I created a document that is sort of contains the outline and the basic content, the objectives, the learning objectives, the desired audience, et cetera, of the course. And I kept on feeding it into the LLM and asking it to evaluate, say what's missing, what's less coherent, how can I simplify this, how can I better explain this? And then as I was building the course, I would update this document so I could keep on feeding it back into the LLM and say, well, now that I have this module and I teach this thing, I literally was saying at the end of this one lesson, I was like, I'm going to ask a discussion question of the learner. After they finish these exercises, and I fed in all the transcripts, I've given these lectures, they've done these exercises, they've done these labs, and now I want to do a discussion prompt. What would be the most provocative and interesting question that other CEOs would want to read about their peers talking about? And it came up with, I could ask it for 10 different ideas. And so it was helping me design the course, improve the course, clarify the materials, et cetera. I'm still using it. Even now I'm using it. I could put the whole thing in. I could say, here's a new research report that just came out from PwC. Here's the course that I've created. Tell me, what are the concepts that are in this new PwC report that I should think about integrating into my course? and it will do the heavy lifting of understanding everything about my course, understanding everything about that PwC report, and it'll specifically say, in module 2, you talk about this, but the PwC report actually mentions this new fact. That's inconsistent with what you said. You might want to update that. I mean, it will literally coach me through every element of the course. I could evaluate any reading or any report, and I could ask the LLM, how might I consider integrating certain insights from this report into the course?
In fact, it can have the power, empower educators to provide real time updates to their academic literature going forward.
Absolutely. In fact, in module 5, which I kind of tacked onto the back, I call them critical insights. These are late breaking articles that are coming out, articles, research reports, etc. With the article, I actually have a prompt that I have in there. I call it an integration prompt, where if the CEO puts in her strategy, then they can put in this prompt that summarizes the reading. And the prompt says, for a CEO who has this stated strategy, tell that CEO what are the key takeaways from this reading or this research report, and how might they adjust their strategy based on what's in this reading. So it's actually doing cognitive work on behalf of the CEOs on how to understand and potentially integrate these critical insights.
Fascinating. So keep going and tell us a little bit about what are different ways in which you use AI in your day to day role as a CEO, not just as an educator, but as a CEO.
I go through in the course when I talk about using AI as a thought partner, a certain set of sort of activities that I ask it to perform. And then you can apply these to a lot of different use cases. So I call these things the action verbs, and I have examples and prompts in the course. But I say, here's what the LLM can do for you. It can generate, summarize, explain, analyze, evaluate, compare, synthesize, advise, and communicate. It could do a lot of other things too, but those are the actions, the tasks that I ask the LLM to do. So you might say, well, what do you mean analyze? Well, I'll take my competitor's earnings call from a certain quarter and I'll do their earnings call from the previous quarter and I'll say, analyze these two earnings calls and tell me what are the differences in the Q3 earnings call? What does it suggest about what's working well and what's not working well at their company? So I'm always doing competitive analysis using this. On the advise, I will often say, here's an email that I'm planning to send to this audience, whether this is one of my direct reports, more likely it's to the whole company. I'll say, here's what I'm planning to say. Here are my objectives that I want to accomplish with this email. Advise me on whether I should change it. Is it clear? Should I say something different? How might the audience respond, etc.? On communicate, this is a pretty easy one. I will often ask it to draft emails, draft speeches, etc. And I have an ability, I actually have writing samples. So before I tell it, I ask it to generate something for me. What I'll say is, I want to deliver this message, and I'll put like 4 bullet points to this audience, and I'll describe the audience. And then I'll say, here's a sample of my writing. If I'm giving a speech, I give it a text of my speech. I have a library of my language. And so I'll say, write a speech for this audience that makes these 3 points. By the way, here's a sample of a speech I just gave. So make it in tone, make it sound like the way I give speeches. And that way, the bullet points give the substance, the audience kind of gives the target, and then the writing sample gives the style. And then the thing will just do a pretty good job of generating stuff for me, emails, speeches, all kinds of presentation bullet points. I mean, all kinds of stuff. So I do that. If I'm going to be interviewed, I could just go on and on and on. You don't want to hear probably all the things I do, but like if I'm going to interview somebody, I'm not going to say, should I hire the person? But what I will say is, here's the job spec for, a VP level position that I'm interviewing for. Here's the person's LinkedIn profile. Here's a description of Coursera. And these are the 3 things that I really want to investigate the most about this person. Generate 5 questions I should ask them in order to do that. And it reads the whole job spec. It reads the person's profile. It reads about, our company. And then it'll say, well, here are 5 good questions to ask. So I do that all the time. If I'm going to be talking to the press, I will get a briefing book from PR team, but I'll often say to GPT, I'll put the PR team's briefing book into GPT and I'll say, what are the 3 most important points I should make here? And what might the team be missing? And then I'll click on the author and I'll be like, oh, here's an article that person just wrote. Here's my company. Here's the author. What are the 3 questions that they're most likely to ask me? It can just really help read and summarize and kind of deliver key takeaways and implications of a lot of content that otherwise I'd have to try to read myself.
Fascinating use casing, a wide range of fascinating use cases. To close out, I want you to zoom out a bit. Online learning can clearly help us navigate change and disruption as they unfold. We have seen that firsthand at Coursera, first during COVID, and now with unprecedented demand for GenAI content. How do you think the evolution of GenAI will shape the future of online learning and education more broadly?
Well, I can tell you for sure a few things because we're already doing them. ChatGPT makes it a lot easier to cheat. So I do think that has nothing to do with Coursera right this moment, but I do think when it comes to any educator who wants to make sure someone really understands something, changing the way that we test and assess people's knowledge and skills is going to be important. And what we're doing at Coursera is we're building an ability using generative AI where we can grab a bunch of multiple choice questions and we can ask the generative AI, if you had to design a hands-on project that could test the same things that are being asked in these questions, what kind of a project might that look like? So we're actually converting the assessment type from multiple choice, say, to a hands-on project. We're also working on something that's very cool, which is sort of an interactive quiz mode where we will generate specific questions for a learner to say, do you understand this thing? And based on their answer, the LLM will decide the next question to ask. It'll challenge their thinking. So this is a lot like the Socratic method, or a lot like a PhD who's defending their dissertation. It's like an oral quiz where you're going back and forth with another counterparty. So I think it will certainly change the way that people assess things. Already at Coursera, we have translated over 4,000 courses into 18 languages. So the availability and accessibility for anybody in the world, no matter what language you speak, to learn material from the best experts in the world is extremely exciting. I'm very excited about that. We've already launched Coach, which is a personalized tutor that helps explain concepts to you, tell you the relevance of what you're learning to your job, help you chart your career, help you put together personal learning plans. I mean, Coach does all sorts of things as your personal tutor and career guide. We have another product that we're launching this quarter. We've been pilot testing for the last 6 months that helps educators create new content. How can I create a course? How can I mix and match from other sources? So this idea that not only can it help learners have more personalized learning, it can help educators more quickly create high quality courses from existing content. So I think it's going to profoundly change almost everything about the way we teach and the way that we learn. I'm optimistic that the good is going to far outweigh the bad by making learning far more accessible and far more effective because it'll be so much more personalized, and far more relevant because you can take that learning and you can personalize it to your job role, your career aspirations, your life, your goals. We're already seeing really wonderful impact from some of these personalized coach related tutoring services.
On that incredibly inspiring note, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, appreciate it, Arnab. Great to be here.
The key to navigating the GenAI conundrum lies in high quality education and training, enabling leaders and workers to adopt GenAI both quickly and safely. Jeff's groundbreaking course, Navigating Generative AI, a CEO Playbook, shows you a step by step how to learn and apply GenAI to drive innovation and productivity at your organization. You can take the course now on Coursera.org. If you enjoyed this episode of the Coursera podcast, please rate, review, and share. Until next time, I'm Arun Avsina. Thank you for tuning in and thank you for learning with us.